Please be seated. I'd like to take a minute to call your attention to some announcements in your handout. A reminder, as at Rosh Hashanah, if you take a look at the bottom of page 9, you will find all the information you need about our hunger relief drive. As you know, important every year. As you know, a fulfillment of the words of Isaiah that we will hear tomorrow. As you know, the agencies and organizations in our community are counting on us now more than ever. Please make sure to bring food either to the food donation truck, to make a cash donation, to use these QR codes. Whatever is the way that you can help, please make sure to do it at this sacred season. I also want to turn your attention to page 5 in your handouts, and there you will find all of the amazing opportunities that will take place tomorrow afternoon, starting at 12:45. So on page 4, you see the schedule of services. On page 5, you see this expanded program called Expanding the Tent. Opportunities for study and reflection from 12:45 until 3 in the afternoon. You can see there are sessions that involve music, poetry, movement. There are sessions for teens. There are sessions of meditation. And then in the 12 to 3 in the bottom right-hand corner, you see ongoing spaces that aren't organized classes, but the opportunity to take reflection in a quiet space, to learn more through our docents in the Barbazale Center for Living History, to just sit with a book or sit with the beauty of nature, to connect to Israel through special opportunities that will be available in Teicher. When we rejiggered services and removed the repeat of the Yom Kippur morning service, it was with the goal of creating this, of creating an afternoon of opportunity where you can choose your own Yom Kippur spiritual adventure on the path that is meaningful to you as part of this community of strength and of prayer. The other thing I want to say is, if you take a look at the bottom of page 2, you notice, and I can't tell by the lights if he's still up there, but Andres Diaz, who has brought us the gift of his musicianship on the cello for 20 years at Kol Nidre, not only playing Kol Nidre, not only playing Bloch's prayer, but playing at other parts in the service. This is Andres's last time with us. He is retiring, and Andres, whether you are here or whether you are listening later, we want you to know how deeply grateful we are for all the gifts you have shared. Kol Nidre calls to our souls tonight. It calls to us as individuals, each with our own struggles and joys, our own convictions and uncertainties. And it calls to us as a community, because we make this journey in relationship as part of a people, as partners in covenant, as citizens of the world. So what does it mean to speak to the Jewish soul tonight? Amidst political violence in America, heartbreak in Israel and Gaza, tonight amidst the burning polarization that scorches the fabric of American society and our own Jewish community, I confess that I couldn't decide which of these less than cheery subjects to address this evening, until I realized that it is all the same spiritually urgent Jewish subject. And that subject, though I hate to say it in a season of hope, is darkness. I do not mean the darkness of doom and gloom, though there is plenty of that to go around. I do not mean the darkness of hopelessness, which our tradition categorically rejects. I mean the very specific darkness which lies near the heart of the Passover story that we know so well. It is the darkness the Torah calls choshech afela, the darkness of the 9th plague upon Egypt. Of it, the Torah says in Exodus chapter 10, verse 23, Lo ra'ah ish et re'ehu, The darkness was so thick that a person could not see his neighbor. Our commentators add, the greatest darkness is when a person does not see his fellow and does not participate in the distress of others. If a person does not see his fellow or does not want to see him, there is darkness in the world. Charlie Kirk was assassinated in broad daylight, but he was assassinated in Choshech Afela, the darkness that blinds us to each other. The early morning attack on the ICE detention center that took the life of detainee Norlan Guzman Fuentes occurred half a country away from that Utah campus, but in the same darkness. The assassination of Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark in June, the murder of Israeli embassy employees Yaron Lischinski and Sarah Lynn Milgram in May, and the list goes on. We do not do ourselves any favors by trying to squeeze tragedy into self-serving partisan narratives or by ignoring the victims affiliated with another political party. Each life was a unique spirit, and each murder had its own tragic circumstances. But a plague, surely, of blinding darkness in which we as a society have ceased to see one another. How did we get here? You know the analysis. While there has always been a polemical strain in American politics, for years now our nation's discourse has become increasingly coarsened and polarized. What we might have once called conflicting positions are now in all-out war with each other. We have become fluent in the language of vitriol and accusation. We see internal conflict or external compromise as weakness, so we quash our own doubts in order to go along with the shouting crowd and in the process chip away at our own integrity. From the right and from the left, we have abandoned curiosity for contempt, flattening each other's positions into easily attacked caricatures, and leaving no room for anything resembling complexity or conversation. And once the language of discourse is only vehement and insulting, why would I want to engage with someone who disagrees with me? If to attempt dialogue is to submit myself to attack, isn't it rational simply to avoid it, retreat into silence or distraction, or seek out only the groups where I can find safety and solidarity? And once I'm with my people, I easily become even more distrustful of the folks on the other side of the divide, if I'm willing to see them as folks at all. In a bitterly contentious society, hunkering down in the safety of our silos is completely understandable, which is why we all do it. But while shielding ourselves from difference might bring affirmation and comfort, it also comes at real moral cost. It too easily diminishes our capacity for empathy, starts to reduce our sense of ethical obligation to the other. It narrows the scope of our seeing. That is how the downward spiral works. Vehemence reinforces polarization because we want to feel safe in our silos. And polarization feeds vehemence because once safe in our silos, we no longer know or value each other. As we learned from Rabbi Lewis on Rosh Hashanah, the dominance of social media only exacerbates the problem. Our feeds reinforce what we already think. Any sense of common narrative disappears. Unproven claims abound. And most of all, anger sells. We used to think that extremism was reserved for the shadowy online platforms whose consequences remained online. But each sniper's bullet has refuted that once comforting conclusion. Whether we are online or not, we participate in a society inescapably shaped by what Bret Stephens calls the algorithms of outrage. Choshech afela. And so the darkness thickens. And no less for us as a Jewish community, as we stumble through the fog of war in Israel and Gaza with conflicting perspectives and universal pain. Our tradition asks us, as it has every day since the horrific Hamas attacks on October 7th, how will we navigate this darkness? How great are our hearts? Do they have room for the brutal suffering still of hostages and their families, for the loved ones of fallen Israeli soldiers, for too many dignified eulogies, too many tears, for an Israel under constant threat from Iran and its proxies, for the remarkable efforts already begun to rebuild shattered hearts and lives. And in the thick darkness of conflict and fear, can we let ourselves see the devastation of Gaza, the hungry and withered children? Because beyond the arguments about statistics and photographs, beyond the overwhelming culpability of Hamas in this catastrophe, there is a human reality crying in the darkness. To name that pain is not to absolve the evil of our enemies, and it is no disloyalty to the Israel I love. It will not help me unsee the overturned tricycles and burned out homes we visited on kibbutz 3 months after the attack, to unhear the crunch of broken glass underfoot. But to name the pain of Gaza is to strike a spark of humanity in the living hell that this war has become, and to shine a light of moral responsibility into the darkness. In the words of the courageous international statement by 80 leading Orthodox rabbis just over a month ago, we affirm that Hamas's sins and crimes do not relieve the government of Israel of its obligations to make whatever efforts are necessary to prevent mass starvation. May this same government finally respond to the outraged cries of hundreds of thousands of Israelis in the streets and bring the hostages home. May the peace initiative introduced at the White House earlier this week bear fruit. If a person does not see his fellow or does not want to see him, there is darkness in the world. We know that Israel's fight against Hamas matters deeply to us, and we know that supporters of Israel have disagreed just as deeply about how the Israeli government should proceed. But what about the rest? Why should the toxicity of American discourse be a Jewish concern? First, as we also learned on Rosh Hashanah, because the degraded tone of American conversation directly taints and twists how American Jews talk to each other. For better and sometimes for worse, we are integrated into American society, and we are subject to all of its influences, especially if we do not choose to resist them. Online and in person, we have talked to each other in shameful ways. May we repent of it. Second, and here I quote Jewish spiritual leader and scholar Michal Biton, the degradation of discourse is a Jewish concern because part of the battle for Jewish safety is the battle for a healthy America. History teaches us that we Jews have thrived where democracy flourishes and suffered persecution when civil liberties and civil discourse erode. Sometimes anti-Semitism rears its timeless and ugly head in plain sight. Other times the targeting may not start with us, but it too often ends with us. The battle for Jewish safety is the battle for a healthy America. We have a direct and existential stake in the quality of our democracy and in turning down the heat that threatens it. But the most important reason I ask you to reflect on the darkness which blinds us to one another is that here tonight, in the tradition we embrace and the covenant we affirm, we can begin to push back against that darkness. Because whether you identify with right or left or none of the above, your Jewish tradition offers the best rebuttal and resistance I know to the corrosive secular culture we all inhabit. Your tradition that insists that we recognize the God-given dignity of every human being. Your tradition that commands us to see the heart of the stranger, the immigrant, the widow, the orphan. Your tradition that teaches that only by recognizing the other can we transcend the self and live a life of meaning. Your tradition that sees in community not the cozy blanket of conformity, but a summons to see myself as part of a greater whole, replete with all the tensions and responsibilities that a call beyond the self demands. Judaism, far from squelching argument, celebrates it. And we enshrine dissent. The Talmud, compiled 1,500 years ago in a supposedly more primitive age, records majority and minority opinions. It offers disagreement after disagreement, often leaving them unresolved. Our sages were explicitly skeptical of unanimity, and they reserved highest praise for the school of Hillel, who would conduct themselves with restraint and record their opponents' opinions before their own. When the members of the Sanhedrin, the Jewish Supreme Court, gathered to deliberate, the Talmud says they would sit in a semicircle. Why? Kedei sheyihu ro'in zeh et zeh. So that the judges could see each other, regard each other, know each other. Think about that. Leaders sitting in proximity, valuing debate, making sure that they look each other in the eye, witness each other's humanity in agreement or dissent. That is your Jewish legacy. And the contrast could not be clearer to the pain and insult we so casually inflict in our blindered discourse today, from the highest seats of government to our own glowing laptops. 1,500 years ago, our sages staked this tradition on seeing. They staked this tradition on the conviction that the consideration of different opinions improves deliberation and strengthens community, that we can engage in civil dialogue without forsaking the strength of our convictions. Maybe that's why our Jewish dinner tables, and certainly mine, do not tend to be islands of quiet tranquility. You've heard it before, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. And you've heard before that it's not just a joke. It's an ethos. It's an ethos rooted in humility, in the recognition that none of us possesses the whole truth. It's an ethos rooted in empathy, the attempt to put ourselves in the shoes of another to best understand their experience and perspective. It's an ethos rooted in regard, because the person whose opinions or actions are making me furious is still a person. I may decry their position and they mine. As the late Justice Antonin Scalia once said, some very good people have some very bad ideas. But as soon as I lose regard for their inherent dignity, I am on a steep and slippery slope, leading away from the heart of our tradition and towards found bullets in the woods with the assassin's messages written on them. So what do we do with this magnificent legacy of ours? These core Jewish principles that stand in stark countercultural opposition to the forces of violence and distrust that permeate our society. Or, as one frustrated congregant said to me last week, how do you enter into dialogue across difference when one of the differences is that the other guy isn't interested in dialogue? Another congregant last week, I know it's all a mess, but what can we do about it? Fair questions. Here is one rabbi's imperfect attempt at response. First, start with self. If I live in a society seething with injury and insult, what do I choose to let in? How do I curate my own sources of information and influence? Dehumanizing rhetoric may be in vogue and tempting to consume, but no one requires it as part of our daily diet. We may not have absolute control, but we can make choices about what we see and hear. If we feel bombarded by language of division, we can make the effort to seek out voices that speak for common good. If all we see is anger, we have the option to seek beauty. They are all equally part of God's world, even if the algorithms don't tell us so. Choose something that inspires you. Choose something that makes you laugh. Call a friend. Come to services. Take a walk. Experience joy. I have friends who have removed themselves from some social media platforms altogether. Others who engage in social media fasts, specific time periods in which they stay off their feeds. We are at constant risk of manipulation. It's important to remember we have agency. Another curation discipline: make it a habit to read things you disagree with. This past year, I subscribed to 2 journals, knowing in advance that they do not reflect my political views. Reading them has sometimes been humbling, sometimes enraging, sometimes persuasive, and always enriching. I'm an old guy. I read journals. But whatever is your version of that, I recommend it. The internet offers a host of news aggregators, sites and apps like All Sides, Google News, and The Perspective, specifically designed to offer diverse points of view on the issues of the day. Yes, all of this takes more time in our busy lives, but it's a good empathy workout, and it stretches our curiosity in ways that would make our sages proud. Most of all, it requires us to dwell in discomfort, a necessary skill if we are to reconnect with each other and the best that is in us. When it comes to the painful political divisions in our family and in our society, I believe we approach them with incremental steps, rooted in the values of our tradition. I do not think that we can sprinkle fairy dust on Washington or Austin and change the nature of political discourse overnight. But I do believe that healthy discourse in small doses with the right partners is more achievable and has more influence than we think. I will say, for one, that some of my favorite meetings with individual congregants are the ones when you come in to tell me what you disagree with. Those conversations are almost always respectful, and we pretty much never convince each other of anything. But we remind each other most of the time that we are in this together. And that conversation and that reminder make our community stronger. As our President Sarah Albert mentioned at Rosh Hashanah, this year Temple will begin our engagement with an organization called Resetting the Table, which will start with leadership training and then spread with opportunities for all our congregants, all with the goal of giving us the skills to engage in constructive dialogue across difference. Again, no changes will grow up overnight, but I believe with Maimonides that whatever kindness, decency, and humility we put out into the world, tip the world towards good. In the painful fractures with people we love, over politics and Israel in particular, I again believe that we start small. by looking across the shattered divide for what we might still share, despite the issues that separate us. Psychologists teach that when we disagree on big things, we tend to inaccurately presume that we disagree on everything. So maybe we rebuild by not talking about the difficult political stuff first. Either way, the reach across takes courage and risks rejection. It won't always work. But if we do it in the spirit of humility, empathy, and curiosity, we will know that we have tried. At a season of forgiveness, may we forgive others and forgive ourselves when our best efforts seem to fall short. Elie Wiesel often told the story of the righteous man who came to an evil city. And day after day, year after year, he preached and protested against the people's evil ways. After many years, a passerby approached him and asked, "Why do you continue to protest day after day and year after year when the people have not changed?" And the righteous man responded, "At first, I protested in order to change them. Now I protest so that they will not change me." On those days when I wonder if the clarion call of our ancient wisdom can effectively combat the current crisis, I have Plan A faith and Plan B faith. Plan A faith is that our Jewish principles of humane respect and regard for difference can build healing for our community and our society if we each commit to living out those principles in our own lives one day at a time. One act of respect at a time, one act of humility at a time, one urgent call for justice at a time, one act of compassion at a time, create and sustain the momentum for sacred change. My Plan B faith is that if nothing else, when we live by those principles, we will not succumb to what surrounds us. I'm putting my chips on Plan A, but in either case, we will know we have resisted the darkness. Back in the Exodus story, when God inflicts the plague of Choshech Afelah on the Egyptians, the Torah says, "Ulechol b'nei Yisrael haya or b'moshevotam." But the Israelites had light in their dwellings. The idea is that then our ancestors were spared the plague of darkness. I do not think we have been so fortunate this time around. The idea is that then God provided light in our dwellings in a time of crisis, and we pray the same will be true for us. But in the meantime, the light is ours to kindle. The light of a great tradition's wisdom. The light of our God-given capacity for good, for transformation, for courage and healing and hope. Through that light, may we see the face of the other, sense the suffering of the other, hear the voice of the other. Ulechol b'nei Yisrael haya or b'moshevotam. In all our dwellings, for us, for our families, for our people, for God's world. May the light of this new year shine with blessing and hope for us all. Shana Tova.